welcome back to the Internet Law Podcast. I'm Lindsay Goldrick-Dean.
And I'm Yair Cohen.
And today we have a special podcast which is dedicated to a right to be forgotten. So Yair, what is a right to be forgotten?
A right to be forgotten is a right that was given to individuals who live in Europe or who have a connection to European states, whereas those individuals can have material about them being deleted from search engines.
What sort of things can be deleted from the internet?
Oh, it varies. Originally, the right was giving over criminal convictions. So someone say who had a criminal conviction from many years ago, and it was a major conviction, and that person felt that over the years he was unable to rehabilitate himself, because every time somebody would search up for his name, that conviction would come up, and people would assume that it was quite recent and prejudge him.
I can imagine that it would, sabotage your career and spoil relationships.
It goes far beyond the sabotaging a career, because the first thing that is really important for people is just to live and lead normal life. And when you know that all this material is there constantly, it makes you feel intimidated. It's very difficult to meet new people, because you don't know whether they read about your conviction from 20 years ago, about your whatever other private information that might be there on the internet. So it affects your entire life. It affects your family, it affects your children, it affects your ability to have play day for your kids, because your friends' parents might be looking you up.
Yes, really quite oppressive, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
So who can use the right to be forgotten?
Although it started as a right it was given for in relation to criminal convictions, over the years we have successfully applied it to people who got divorced, for example, and divorce was made public, perhaps because they were public figures, perhaps because they were just rich people and the divorce proceedings were quite juicy, and the newspapers wrote about that. We managed to find a way to have hundreds of reports being removed from internet search engines. But it is also for people who did certain things in the past that are not necessarily criminal. For example, page 3 girls.
Yes.
We've dealt with a fair number of page 3 girls who perhaps 10 or 15 years ago felt that it was okay to do that. They didn't see any harm in going topless or doing soft porn. And now they met someone and they started a family and they're planning to have children or already have children, and they really want that information removed.
I suppose also if you were a student and you were posting comments that you probably wouldn't make now, or send images to people, and now you've moved on and you have perhaps have a different profession, and it's not helpful in your new profession, having those immature perhaps comments just hanging over you, so it would impede your current profession, things like that.
Absolutely. In another group that we are regularly removing articles for is a group of professional people who perhaps had been disciplined, or there had been complaints made about them or against them by patients or by colleagues. We recently dealt with the heart surgeon who was unable to move on with his career because something years ago somebody made a complaint about him that allegedly he was responsible for the death of a patient, and that complaint was made to the coroner. And he was cleared of any wrongdoing, but the report was still there on the internet, and every time that he applied for a senior position in a hospital, he was being turned down. And he felt that a lot of it was to do with the fact that the hospitals did not want to associate himself at a management position with someone who had allegedly, at least, been involved in causing death of a patient.
And also people that get wrongly accused. There was the chap in Bristol that was accused of murder. all over the media. And the trouble is, although he was cleared, he always had that stigma attached to him. People think him and they associate him with that crime. So people like him would really benefit from the right to be forgotten.
It's actually very interesting because the right to be forgotten was clearly made in relation to a criminal conviction. So people who actually been through the legal process and had not been convicted, initially they were in a much worse position than people who had been convicted. There was no a right to rehabilitate. They had not been convicted, so there's nothing to rehabilitate from. But quite often there would have been reports from legal proceedings or reports from the court where perhaps a witness was quoted of saying something about the person accused, or perhaps the prosecution put the case forward at the beginning of the trial with all the accusations. And by the time the case finished, there have been so many reports about what that individual had allegedly done that the fact that eventually they were found no guilty didn't really matter, because, people say there's no smoke without fire and
Right.
things like that. So we had to work really, really hard to convince Google and Bing and other search engine providers that there was a need to extend the right to be forgotten, and it wasn't just restricted to people who had criminal convictions and have a right by law to be rehabilitated, but also to people who had not been convicted but just been accused of certain offenses.
Right, okay. And does it make a difference about the removal if the material on the internet was published after the ruling of right to be forgotten, which was in 2014? Does it make a difference?
It doesn't make a difference at all. But last week I've had a conference call with one of Bing's lawyers in relation to a number of cases, and it seems that Bing has got a general policy that they will not remove anything which is not older than, say, 3 years. However, it is a general policy that is subject to individual cases. So what Bing is saying is we don't feel that we need to remove anything that isn't that old. If it's fresh, if it's new information, our presumption is that we are going to leave it there unless you can convince us otherwise. And this is where we come into the picture as lawyers who specialize in those sort of things. And we can speak to the search engine provider directly and say, look, this case is actually different and you should not really be applying your general policy to this particular case, but look at it individually.